Welcome back to MHS, Midnight Horror Stories. I know that many of you turn to these videos as a gentle way to unwind and ease into sleep. So, before you drift off tonight, could you help me with a small favor? Just leave a quick interaction, a comment, a like, or let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. My goal is to hit around 200 likes within the first 24 hours. Simple actions like these help YouTube appreciate the content and spread the show to more people. Now then, let's dive into tonight's horror stories. People called me a hero after that incident. But how could they know that in those 15 terrifying minutes, I was so scared I almost gave up? I'm Cad, 19 years old. I've always been proud of my physique. I'm almost 6.4 feet tall with solid muscles, the result of regular workouts. I had been working at a Dollar Tree in Kalamazoo, Michigan, for 5 weeks when it happened. That evening, the store was empty. Nora was sitting at the checkout counter, scrolling on her phone. Wade was stocking shelves in the household goods section. I was checking inventory in the back room. The bell on the door rang. I looked up and saw a man walk in. He was taller than me, maybe almost 7 feet. He wore a thick sweatshirt with the hood pulled up, covering half his face, and faded jeans. The first thing I noticed was how he moved. Each step was stiff, like a broken robot. He stopped in the middle of an aisle, his head swiveling, observing everything. His imposing size made me a little uneasy. I moved toward the shelves, pretending to organize products so I could keep an eye on him. He went to the food section. Then everything happened very fast. A terrible crash. He had pushed over an entire rack of candy, sending it spilling all over the floor. "Hey, what are you doing?" I said, walking closer. He turned to look at me but didn't say anything. He just reached into his pocket and pulled out a gun. My mind was reeling, and I couldn't react. And then he fired. I looked down and saw bright red blood soaking through my shirt. The pain was excruciating. "Nora, run!" I screamed. She crawled and ran toward the back door. Wade yelled from a corner of the store, "Gun! Gun!" The man turned his gun toward Wade. The gun fired again. Wade fell, grabbing his leg in pain, blood gushing out. I dove behind the checkout counter, my left arm numb. The man fired shot after shot into the shelves. The smell of gunpowder filled the air. Then, after a few seconds, everything went silent. Suddenly, I heard heavy breathing. He had jumped over the counter. I lunged at him, grabbing his leg and pulling hard. He fell, and the gun slid away. We both wrestled to get the gun. He was incredibly strong. His arms were like iron clamps around my neck. I fumbled around and found the gun. He froze, his grip loosening. The gun clicked, but no bullet was fired. Enraged, he punched me square in the jaw. My mouth filled with the taste of blood, and I felt extremely dizzy. He pinned me to the floor with his full weight, his hands squeezing my throat. I was just inches from him, and I could clearly see every wrinkle on his haunting face. My vision was fading. I felt like I was slowly sinking into a dark pool, unable to escape. Suddenly, Wade rammed the attacker's side. He rolled to one side, his hands releasing my neck. I gasped for air. We used all our strength to pin him to the floor. A few minutes later, police sirens blared outside. They stormed into the store, fully equipped, and quickly handcuffed the attacker. The strange thing was, he didn't resist at all. He just lay there with an empty look in his eyes, as if none of what had just happened meant anything to him. An ambulance took Wade and me to the hospital. The bullet had shattered a bone in my left arm, requiring immediate surgery. The press later called me a hero, but I didn't think of myself that way. I just felt lucky to be alive. Our attacker had a history of severe mental illness. He was sentenced to life without parole for attempted murder and armed assault. Nora went back to work at the store, but she no longer scrolled on her phone. She was always on alert with every customer, her eyes constantly scanning the area. Wade still limped slightly from his injury, but he told me it was a sign of courage, a memory of the night we saved each other's lives. I'm slowly recovering and working out to regain my muscle mass. I realized something important. The physical strength I was so proud of wasn't just for showing off or impressing people. It was also to protect myself and others, to stand up against injustice and cruelty, and I started thinking about becoming a police officer. That colorful toy truck almost killed me. I'm Mike, 32 years old. 3 months ago, I worked as a quality control inspector at a Dollar Tree distribution center in Laredo, Texas. My job was to inspect goods and make sure they met the standards before they went on the shelves. I had been doing this for 5 years and had never encountered any serious problems. I was checking a new shipment of toys. The items were small, brightly colored plastic trucks. I picked one up and turned it over to look at the label. Below the regular English text, there was a passage in another language. I was drawn to the bold red characters, which were different from the rest of the label. I looked around, making sure no one was watching, and secretly put the toy truck in my jacket pocket. When I got home, I quickly opened a translation app. The results shocked me. Warning: contains toxic substances dangerous to children. I read it 3 times. This toy was not supposed to be sold in Dollar Tree stores across the United States. I didn't know what was happening with this latest shipment. At work, I noticed Rick, my direct supervisor, talking to a man in a black suit in the parking lot. I saw the strange man hand Rick an envelope. The sense of unease inside me grew. That evening, I scraped off a little paint from the toy truck to send it for testing. I told them I suspected there was a problem with my child's toy. The results came back 3 days later. The lead content was 10 times the allowable level. There were also cadmium and some other toxic chemicals. According to the report, long-term exposure could cause brain damage, affect a child's development, and even lead to cancer. That day, I decided to confront Rick. I put the toy truck on his desk, along with the test report. "You need to see this." Rick read the report with a cold expression, then stood up and walked closer to me. "Mike, you have a wife and a daughter, right? The little one is almost 8, isn't she?" The way he mentioned my daughter's name made me clench my fists to stay calm. That wasn't a normal question. I grabbed the toy truck and the report and took a step back. "I'm going to the police." At this point, the last bit of a smile completely vanished from Rick's face. "You're going to regret this." I ran back to my desk, packed up my things, and quit my job immediately. I drove home as it started to get dark. I thought about my wife and daughter, wondering if I should tell them what was happening. When I reached a downhill stretch of road, I gently pressed the brake, but the car showed no signs of slowing down. I pressed harder. The pedal went all the way down without any resistance. In a panic, I pulled the handbrake. I saw that it had no effect. The car was accelerating downhill. The taillights of the truck in front of me were getting closer. I quickly swerved hard, and the car crossed into the oncoming lane and crashed straight into the median. The sound of the impact echoed in my head, and everything went black. I woke up in the hospital. 3 days had passed. My wife was sitting next to me, her eyes red. The doctor said I was lucky to be alive, but my spinal cord was damaged. I might never walk again. I was completely devastated. My body and mind were in a state of emptiness. Seeing my wife and daughter, I remembered Rick's inquiry. I was sure he was behind all of it, but there was nothing I could do. In my mind, I saw Rick's cold smile. I knew exactly who was behind all of this, but I chose to stay silent. I had already suffered so much pain and such a serious outcome. I didn't want my wife and daughter to suffer anymore. If I spoke up, Rick wouldn't necessarily get caught. He would find more horrible ways to take revenge on my family. Thinking this, I just nodded and thanked the police officer, telling him I didn't know who did it. I had to stay silent to protect the people I loved. Not long after, I convinced my wife to move away. I told her I wanted to start a new life, away from the painful memories of the accident. My wife agreed, and we moved to a small town in the north, hundreds of miles from our old home. 6 months later, I happened to catch a news report on TV. A journalist was reporting on the recall of thousands of toxic Dollar Tree toys. Images of small, colorful trucks appeared on the screen. The exact same toys I had discovered. The reporter said a large-scale investigation had been launched, and many people involved had been arrested and prosecuted. The camera panned over the list of arrested people, but I didn't see Rick Brown's name anywhere. I turned off the TV and looked out the window. My daughter was playing in the garden. My wife was preparing dinner in the kitchen. Our lives had returned to peace. I sat in my wheelchair, thinking about what had happened. But what about Rick? He was probably somewhere, continuing his dirty business, but one day he would have to pay for his choices. All I want now is to protect my little family. I still see those faces every night, a family of 4. Their pictures in the newspaper smiling happily, unaware that that dinner would be their last. I could have saved them, but I didn't. I'm Cal. I was 20 years old at the time. I worked the night shift at a Dollar Tree in Yakima, Washington. The store was on Nob Hill Boulevard, a pretty empty area after 9 p.m. It was an incredibly difficult time for my family. My mom had just been diagnosed with lung cancer. The hospital bills were piling up. The job at Dollar Tree paid $9 an hour, which wasn't much, but I had no other options. I worked the night shift. My job was to stock shelves from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. Deb was my manager. She was middle-aged and pretty skinny. Deb had a habit of biting her nails until they bled. I figured it was from work stress. After a month of working there, I noticed something strange. Twice a week around 2 a.m., a white truck with no company logo would park at the back door. Deb always handled these deliveries by herself. She would tell me to keep working in the front of the store. I asked about the strange deliveries. Deb snapped, "It's just extra stock. The company sends it whenever it's ready." But the boxes had no labels. I didn't question it anymore. My night job and family situation kept me busy enough. One day, I was leaving after my shift when I realized I had left my phone in the stockroom. When I went back, the stockroom door was ajar. Through the crack, I saw Deb working under a dim light. On the table were dozens of packages of deli meat. She was carefully peeling off the old labels, spraying some kind of liquid on each package. Finally, she would carefully wrap them and put on new labels. I was frozen, trying to squint to see what the liquid was. My hand unconsciously touched the door, pushing it wide open. Deb immediately looked up. Our eyes met. "Cal, get in here." Her voice was strangely calm. I walked in. Deb told me to sit down across from her. She continued to label a few more packages before turning to me. "Your mom is seriously sick, right? Hospital bills aren't cheap." I was silent. "I'll give you an extra $500 in cash every week. You just have to forget what you saw tonight. What you're doing is illegal. That chemical could be deadly. Everyone dies in different ways. But if your mom doesn't have money for treatment, she could die right now," Deb said, her voice rising to drown out my objections. She leaned forward. "I have 2 daughters to raise. My husband left last year. What other choice do you think I have?" I looked at the meat packages on the table. A few of them had turned a grayish green, but after she sprayed the liquid, they looked fresh again. I thought about my mom lying in her hospital bed, needing expensive medicine. I clenched my fists, looking down. I need to think about it. "You have until your next shift to decide. If you tell anyone..." She didn't finish the sentence, but the look in her eyes made her threat clear. I went home and couldn't sleep. $500 a week could solve a lot of my problems. I convinced myself that it probably wasn't serious enough for anyone to be in danger from eating the meat. At my next shift, I accepted Deb's deal, but a part of me was torn. I started to secretly take pictures whenever Deb was working in the stockroom. I wrote down the dates and times the truck arrived. I kept one of the relabeled meat packages in my freezer at home as evidence. I told myself that one day, when my mom was better, I would report everything with this evidence. A month went by. I was getting paid regularly, and my financial situation and my mom's health were both improving. One day, while watching the afternoon news, I saw a reporter standing in front of a hospital, reporting on a series of food poisoning cases. As of now, 12 people have died. Among them is a family of 4. My heart stopped when I heard the next sentence. The investigation revealed that all of them had eaten a type of deli meat sold at Dollar Tree. I immediately realized it was the meat I had helped Deb put on the shelves. I rushed to the Dollar Tree. The parking lot was filled with police cars and health inspectors' vehicles. Yellow tape was everywhere. I parked far away, watching from my car. An inspector in a white suit walked out of the back door, carrying a plastic bag with a meat sample. I called Deb, but her number was no longer in service. I decided to drive to her house, but when I got there, her neighbors said Deb had moved out the night before. I clenched the steering wheel, filled with anger and helplessness. I drove back to the Dollar Tree and sat silently in my car. I should have been more firm, stuck to my original thoughts. Then maybe I wouldn't be tormenting myself like this now. After a few hours of internal struggle, I decided to talk to the police. But just as I opened the car door, my phone buzzed. A text message from an anonymous number appeared. It was a single picture of me standing in the stockroom, taking money from Deb. I looked around the parking lot, then jumped back into my car and drove straight home. That night, I packed my things and convinced my mom to move to Scranton to live with my aunt, telling her I had found a new job there. We moved the next morning, but the fear still haunts me. I followed the investigation every day and learned that Deb still hadn't been found. My mom and I moved a second time. I changed my phone number 3 times. I deleted all my social media accounts, but I still can't feel at peace. Last month, while walking down the street, I froze when I saw a skinny woman standing on a street corner. She was wearing sunglasses and was covered up, but the way she bit her nails was exactly like Deb. I only looked away for a few seconds, and when I looked back, she was gone. My mom passed away last March. The cancer had spread too quickly, and there was nothing we could do. In her final moments, she held my hand and whispered weakly, "I know you did your best." I broke down in tears because I had hidden everything from her until the very end. I'm Chrissy, and this is a story I wish had never happened. But sometimes, no matter how horrifying, the truth needs to be told as a warning. I grew up in a small town in Ohio where everyone knew each other, but instead of warm familiarity, I felt suffocated. My life was a series of days of scrutiny and ridicule. I was different from an early age. My curvaceous body, pale skin, and dark brown hair made me stand out, but not in the way I wanted. On the school grounds, I was not welcome. The laughter of friends is always accompanied by taunts. Chrissy, the walking refrigerator. I try to ignore it, but that cruelty doesn't stop at school. It followed me home, appearing at the family dinner table, in the concerned eyes of my mother and the cruel jokes of my cousins. By adulthood, things didn't get any better. I worked at the local supermarket, standing behind the counter, where customers glanced over as I wrapped the bags of snacks and candy they bought. I've learned to smile awkwardly, pretending it doesn't hurt me. But the truth is, I always felt like a failure. At age 24, my weight hit 300 pounds. I tried everything: keto, paleo, juicing, intermittent fasting, hitting the gym until my body fell apart. But the weight doesn't go away. It's like it's mocking all my efforts. When the doctor advised me to have gastric bypass surgery, I thought I had found hope. But after many consultations, they refused because my weight and overall health were too dangerous to do it. That disappointment was the final straw. One night, in desperation, I searched the internet and found the dark corners of the internet, the dark web. There, among the anonymous websites, I came across an ad for a miracle weight loss pill. Warning text from the seller: for desperate people only. At that moment, I suddenly felt a strong sense of comfort and sympathy. Without any hesitation, I accessed the ad and was happy to know that my weight had found a way out. 3 days later, The package I ordered through that advertisement was delivered. It is neat, tidy, but full of mystery, sealed with red wax printed with a strange symbol, a snake wrapped around its stomach. When opened, the dark red pills sparkled in the light, as if they held some dark power within. I just took a few seconds to think, and then swallowed a pill with joy and hope. Miraculously, my body began to change. The first day, I lost 5 pounds. 3 days later, that number increased to 10 pounds. The best part is that I can eat whatever I want: pizza, burgers, ice cream, and the weight continues to drop. I stood in front of the mirror for hours, admiring my body. Although I lost a lot of weight, I didn't notice much change in my appearance. Anyway, I'm very happy and have even more hope. But that joy was extremely short-lived. A week later, I started to feel a burning sensation in my stomach, as if there was a fire burning inside. I drank water constantly, but my thirst never subsided. What was worse were the hunger pangs, worse than anything I had ever experienced. That first night, I rummaged through the refrigerator like a wild animal, my trembling hands cramming everything I could into my mouth in a frenzy. But the stomach is like a bottomless pit. As everything within my reach disappeared, my eyes filled with madness, searching for anything that could quench the bottomless hunger tormenting my body. The third night, in extreme hunger, I saw a mouse running across the kitchen. My eyes were glued to it, as if a primal instinct had just been activated. Before I could think, I rushed forward, grabbed it tightly in my hand, feeling its small body trembling. I don't think of anything. Squeezing the little animal tightly in my hand, my teeth sank deep into its soft body. The fishy smell flowed into my mouth, and I swallowed it all in a frenzy. When I realized what I had just done, I shivered and was horrified. But hunger quickly dispelled all logic. I chewed and swallowed in a frenzy, feeling neither disgust nor regret, only the intense, dark hunger that was controlling every action of mine. In the following days, I could no longer distinguish between what was food and what was inedible. I tore apart the box, chewing on the cardboard that still had food crumbs stuck to it. My teeth ached, but the hunger wouldn't let me stop. My body began to change horrifically. My cheeks hollowed out, my pale skin turned an ashen gray, and my eyes, bloodshot from lack of sleep, gleamed with a wild, predatory look. My fingers became bony, my nails cracked and covered in dried blood. Each time I looked in the mirror, I no longer recognized myself. All I saw was a monster, ready to devour more. My mother was the only one who never left my side. Even though I had destroyed myself, she stayed by my side, gentle like the morning sun. But she couldn't save me either. One night, as I tried to break into the fridge for the last remaining piece of cake, my mother stopped me. Her eyes were filled with worry, her voice pleading, "Chrissy, stop!" But I was no longer myself. I no longer saw my mother, only someone standing in the way of satisfying my hunger. I rushed at her, like a wild animal. My teeth sank into her arm. When I woke up, I found myself kneeling on the kitchen floor, my hands shaking, and my mother lying motionless with bleeding wounds. I felt like my soul was being torn apart, each piece pierced deep into my mind. Terror and guilt welled up, squeezing my chest to the point that I could only kneel there, hands shaking, tears mixing with the fear that I had become something less than human. After that incident, I was arrested and transferred to a mental hospital. Initially, doctors diagnosed me with a serious mental disorder. But after weeks of treatment, they discovered the real cause was a dangerous chemical in the pill I took. The treatment process is very difficult. They had to use medicine to neutralize the toxic substances in my body. The intense hunger gradually disappeared, along with the burning thirst. My mind gradually returned to clarity. My mother, despite being hurt physically and mentally, still forgave me and visited me every week. She said, Chrissy, as long as you live, everything can be fixed. Those words keep me going. Now, after 2 years, I have become a different person. I am no longer obsessed with losing weight, but focus on taking care of my health and finding joy in the small things in life. If you are struggling with your body image, remember that there is no magical solution. Only perseverance and self-love can bring lasting results. Don't let the desire for change turn into destruction. Mental and physical health is always more valuable than anything else.
I'm Hal, 37, and I run a Taco Bell right on a busy street downtown. The place gets a ton of love, so I'm basically working around the clock. One night, around 10:30, I was about to shut down after a long 16-hour grind. Out of nowhere, a couple walked in looking all unsure. The guy went, "Hi, sorry, but can you hook us up with whatever food you've got left?" I was kind of confused, so I didn't reply right away. "We come from way far away, and your place is the only one open." So I was like, "Just hang on a sec." And I couldn't say no since they were customers, you know? It took me like 10 minutes to whip up 2 burritos, even though I didn't have all the ingredients. The couple was super grateful and dug into their food, and watching them enjoy it made me feel way less tired. I was just wandering around cleaning the cashier counter for a bit, and when I turned around, the woman was still munching while the guy was staring at me. I asked, kind of worried, "Is there something wrong with the food, man?" He smiled a bit and said, "Oh no, it's awesome." Usually when I get compliments like that from customers, I'm super happy. But the way the guy looked at me and smiled just gave me the creeps. The guy asked me, "Are you the owner of this place?" "Yes." "Great. Do you live by yourself?" I was like, "Yeah, I live just a few minutes away." I have no idea why I blurted that out without thinking or being careful. The guy got up, threw some cash on the table, and walked out, and the woman quickly jumped up and followed him. I didn't think much of it, just headed home to crash since my body was totally telling me to chill out. As I walked out of the bathroom all wet, I heard loud banging on the door and a woman's weak voice.
"Help me, please."
I froze for a few seconds before bolting to the door, while the woman kept banging and begging. I peeked through the peephole, and it was a woman in messed up clothes with crazy hair and a bunch of bruises all over her. I didn't open the door, but I asked, "What's wrong?" just to be safe.
"Let me in, please. He's about to catch up with me."
I got even more on edge and said, "I'm calling the police right now, just chill out."
"No, please don't call the police. Just let me in."
The woman got more and more freaked out, and her voice along with the banging on the door got faster and way more urgent. When I looked closer at the woman's face, I was shocked. It kind of felt like she was with that guy from earlier. For a few seconds, I caught a glimpse of anger in her eyes. I quickly grabbed my phone and said, "There's a woman in front of my house who needs..." The woman yelled,
"Don't call the cops!"
and punched the door. I jumped back a bit, and the phone I was holding dropped. A few seconds later, along with the woman's wild scream for help, I heard another guy screaming,
"You're dead already, damn it."
"Open the door quick, I'm begging you."
And then just like that, those scary sounds faded away. I hurried to the door and peeked through the peephole, but the woman was gone, and the guy was nowhere to be seen either. The sudden switch totally threw me off. I gripped the doorknob, caught between being scared and curious. There was an axe blade stuck in the door, like just a few millimeters from my forehead. I froze, and my heart felt like it stopped. The axe blade got pulled out, leaving a hole in the door, and this wild-eyed man said,
"I want to taste your blood."
The next few axe hits were super hard on the door, The door was totally wrecked, and I was hiding in the kitchen cabinet, trying to hold my breath. They were coming in, the crazy, mean-looking guy and the woman. "Just a little more," I muttered as the guy got close enough. About 10 minutes later, I was fine and sitting in the living room making a call. In front of me was the guy with a bullet deep in his shoulder, bleeding like crazy, and the woman crying and begging. "Hey, I've got 2 fresh orders here. One for organs and the other, let's see, for entertainment." So, I ended up with a big chunk of money, enough to expand the shop and get the door fixed with the latest high-tech lock.
I'm Egan. My fiance is Ira. We're close friends with a couple, Alden and Daria. Last winter vacation, the 4 of us organized a trip to Aspen Snowmass, Colorado, a place known as a paradise for skiing and camping enthusiasts. We rented a spacious cabin with full amenities, brought along essential items, and began to enjoy the vacation. Alden and Daria have experience in skiing and exploring snow-covered landmarks, while Ira and I love the scenery and the natural winter atmosphere. On the first day in Aspen Snowmass, the first activity we would definitely do is skiing. After that, we soaked in hot tubs, enjoyed beef, craft beer, with various desserts, and took in the surrounding scenery. The first day of the trip ended with 0% energy, but 100% joy and excitement. The next morning, Alden and I woke up earlier, while Ira and Daria were still quite tired. "Do you want to hike and explore that mountain?" Alden said while pointing towards the window behind me. Looking in the direction he pointed, I immediately agreed without looking for a third of a second. The distant mountain was truly captivating. Ira would definitely love it, and I'll bring up the trip to tease her when we get back. I was ready, and while waiting for Alden, I checked the weather forecast on my phone. "The forecast says there's a chance of a snowstorm, Alden," I announced. Alden glanced at my phone screen and smiled lightly. "The chance is only 20%, don't worry." He opened the cabin door, stepped outside, tilted his head back, and took a deep breath, enjoying the light morning sun. I didn't think much, quickly left a message for Ira, and hurriedly followed Alden outside. The fresh morning air, the smell of pine needles, and the clear smell of white snow create a feeling of comfort and strange salvation. I followed Alden, observed and learned from his experiences, paying close attention to every frame of nature. "Everything around us is just a blinding white. Are you sure you'll remember the way back, Alden?" I asked, with a hint of teasing. "Don't worry, Egan. Who do you think I am?" Alden said confidently. After walking for about an hour, we reached the top of the mountain. It was relatively low with a smooth path. But just 20 minutes later, the sky began to darken, with cold, biting winds blowing strongly, bringing waves of white snow. I hurriedly urged my best friend to head down the mountain, but he still casually took a few more photos in the snowstorm. The wind grew stronger by the minute, obstructing our vision. Alden and I held each other's hands tightly to avoid getting separated, trying our best to move quickly. There were moments when we shut our eyes tightly, held each other's hands even harder, and walked on blindly, not knowing where we were going. I'm not sure how long it had been, but the gusts of wind slipped through the gaps in our jackets, making both of us shiver and stutter. Finally, we saw the faint glow of the cabin's light. The sound of my phone and Alden's phone ringing continuously echoed through the air. We both slowed down, took our phones out of our pockets and checked. Countless calls and messages from 2 girls, full of frantic and desperate cries for help. Alden and I immediately quickened our pace, running toward the cabin. The door and windows showed signs of heavy impact. I shouted loudly, calling out Ira's name. Inside the cabin, Ira and Daria were holding each other tightly, trembling with fear. The two girls' bodies on the floor, on the wall, and on objects covered in blood. When she saw Alden and me, Daria burst into tears, running over to hug Alden tightly. Ira looked at me, crying in fear, her body seemingly frozen with an iron-stained red in her hand. I hugged Ira tightly. Her body was ice-cold and trembling. She didn't answer any of my questions, only crying. In the dining room, someone was lying motionless on the floor, which startled me. As I was about to move closer to investigate, Ira's hands gripped me tightly, and she suddenly became frantic. Alden stepped forward, slowly turning on the light in the dining room. "Oscar!" he exclaimed in astonishment. "Isn't this the owner who rented us this cabin?" There were strong impact marks all over his body, and blood was still flowing. The head was the most severely affected, leading to deformation. Alden shakily called the police and emergency services, but the snowstorm was so fierce that it took nearly 30 minutes for them to arrive. Oscar had passed away. We all knew that, but none of us dared to mention it. After receiving medical attention for their injuries, only Daria calmed down enough to begin giving her statement to the police. Ira, however, remained unsettled. Oscar found out that Alden and I had left, so he went after the girls with the intention of doing something malicious to them. Yesterday, when we met to receive the cabin, he didn't see Ira and assumed that only Daria was staying there. The two girls fought to protect each other, and Ira accidentally caused the perverted man's death. The trip ended, and we returned to the city so that Ira and Daria could be hospitalized for treatment of their injuries. Ira, overwhelmed by the psychological trauma, was temporarily unable to speak. She was acquitted on the grounds of self-defense. I feel deeply guilty and remorseful. I will do everything I can to make it right and heal Ira, never leaving her alone, no matter the circumstances.
I lived in a small apartment complex in Ohio. I've been living here for many years, ever since it was still relatively new until now, when it's been rather a rundown place and there were a lot of rumors about it being haunted. The complex was not of a most modern or cozy one, but due to the rather cheap rent, it's still getting fully booked. It's a 5-level building with 3 on each floor, so 15 apartments, where I lived on the 3rd floor. Because it was rather cheap, the majority of the tenants here were college students, and some were of the elderly. I lived in the middle apartment, sandwiched between Cassie, a senior year student, and Maddie, a 57-year-old. Since she's a senior, Cassie spent the majority of her time occupied with studying and preparing for the final exam. For many days, the apartment above where she lived continuously echoed with loud noises. It's like the sound of nails or chisel being hammered into the wall. At first, she'd tried ignoring it, but it kept going and going to the point that it drove her to lose her temper. This morning, Cassie finally snapped. She decided to walk upstairs to have a word with that annoying person. When walking up to the doorway, she politely knocked on the door, but even after a while, there wasn't anyone who came out to greet her. Also, the hammering stopped. Cassie, thinking it was the jerk who knew what she's here for and trying their best to avoid confrontation, began knocking harder. The frustration, combined with the total ignorance from the lousy neighbor, prompting Cassie to begin shouting and knocking more and more. The tenant still adamantly refused to come out, prompting her to twisting the doorknob, then shoulder barge through. The door wasn't locked by any means. Needless to say, it was spooky. Yet Cassie, after a few minutes hesitating, decided to go in and ask the tenant about the noise complaint. But strange enough, the living room was absolutely empty. as if nobody's living here at all. Curious, she went further into the apartment. Knowing clearly that there's nobody actually living here, she was pretty certain about herself. All she needed to know was where the heck did the hammering for many days come from? Going further, Cassie heard a man's mumbling. The mumbling seemed to be rushing up quicker and quicker. Cassie, following the sound, attentively listening to the man's word,
13, 13, 13.
pushed open the bedroom right next to the living room. Everything here remained empty. As soon as she came into the room, the mumbling stopped, as if someone just turned off the cassette tape recording right away. In the corner of the room, there's an old doll. Approaching closer, Cassie shuddered at the creepiness of the doll. The face of it was superbly done. At first glance, she thought it was a 5-year-old baby girl with a body full of scars. The body of the dolls, however, was made of cloth and full of dirt, and there's something like blood. Cassie slowly crouched over the doll, then lifted its arm up. It was really heavy, and then suddenly, she found that blood seemed to ooze out from the doll and soak over Cassie's hands. A nasty stench immediately assaulted Cassie's nose, gagging her. Immediately, she threw away the doll and quickly made it out of the room. Back in her room, Cassie tried her best to clean out the blood, but seemingly couldn't wash it out. She collapsed on her bed, breathed laboriously. Was it just because of all those activities or the air in the rooms getting thicker? The sound of mumbling suddenly returned, of the same man, with the same monotonous sound of the counting.
13, 13, 13.
Too frightened, Cassie closed her eyes and covered her ears. When she came back to her senses, it had been a very long time past and it's already dark outside. Cassie jumped to her phone. It showed 11:59 p.m. The crimson red blood on her hands was no longer there. She felt the sharp pain rang over her temples. Was it real life or just a fantasy dream? There was a sudden alarm on her clock at exactly 0 o'clock. Cassie jumped over to her phone. Weird. She'd never set the alarm on this weird hour. However, the note on the phone said it was just a number. 13. The sound of mumbling suddenly appeared on the front door.
13, 13, 13.
Followed by the sound of walking, but sounded just like hammering on wood. Now it was clear. The sound of hammering was in fact something supernatural walking. Cassie immediately jumped over the front door, locking it shut. Glancing over the peephole, she could see a weird-looking shadow of something humanoid. It was just like a very drunken person trying to walk, neck canted to one side. The sound of hammering echoed at its every step. The mumbling seemed like it's echoing from that shadow. Cassie felt like all her hair was standing straight up at the scene. Yet despite her mind screaming to her to run away, her body was frozen at the peephole, staring at the shadow. The shadow walked closer to Cassie's apartment doorway and showing the face as the doll upstairs. The doll leaned over, staring, its eyes locked on Cassie's. A giggle came out too close, which prompted Cassie to walk backwards, and she suddenly felt like something was there on her back. She turned around, staring face to face with the doll now giggling right behind her. Before she was able to let out any scream, the doll jumped at her. After that, Cassie's missing for everyone in the apartment complex. Not just Cassie, but Maddie disappeared a few days later. One by one, the tenants disappeared without a trace until only I remained. The mumbling of the man became more and more frequent. His mumbling had also changed, as if counting from 13 to 20. It's been a month since the 20th disappearance in this apartment complex. Now I'm looking for the 21st person to play too.
I'm Orla, 29 years old, living in Houston. I have a happy life because I enjoy my work and have extra income. Currently, I live alone in a spacious and cozy house. My house is in a somewhat secluded area of the neighborhood, but that's okay because I like peace and privacy. The neighbors around here aren't very friendly, to say the least. They're somewhat peculiar. I choose not to pay them any mind. They're not relevant to me, after all. On that evening, like any other day, I returned home at 6 p.m. After dinner and a shower, I went to bed at 10 p.m., starting to enjoy what I consider the best time of the day. I got into bed, lying comfortably with a book I was halfway through. I called Milo, my cat whom I've had for 2 years. Usually when Milo hears me call, he happily runs over and lies next to me. But this time he curled up, staring ahead. I looked at Milo and chuckled, thinking he must be full and feeling lazy. I started reading and forgot about Milo's odd behavior. After a while, feeling tired, I changed position, inadvertently noticing that Milo was still lying there, staring under the bed. I approached, picked up Milo, and returned to bed. I placed Milo on my stomach, his favorite lying position. Surprisingly, he fluffed up, emitting little grunts as if being vigilant and uncomfortable with me. Milo jumped off the bed, returning to his previous spot. I sat on the bed, puzzled by his strange behavior. Following Milo's gaze, he was indeed looking under the bed. I started feeling uneasy. I couldn't bring myself to look under the bed, and I didn't know why. Looking around the room, my heart seemed to stop when I inadvertently glanced at the mirror in the corner. The mirror coincidentally reflected a bit under the bed, where a dark figure, seemingly a man, was present. I couldn't see his face clearly, just his glaring white, wild eyes staring out. I was truly panicked. I bit my lip, trying not to make any unusual noise. I told myself to stay calm, trying to act like I didn't know anything. Otherwise, he might lose control, and I would be in terrible danger. I tried to breathe, regulate my heartbeat, then observe the room to figure out a solution. The first thing I wanted to do was call the police, but my phone was charging and placed on a table 3 meters away from the bed. My body trembled. I wasn't sure if I could get off the bed, but at that moment, I had no choice but to take a risk. I couldn't sit here in panic forever. Slowly, I stepped off of the bed, trying to straighten up, pretending I was very comfortable. Approaching the phone, I trembled, trying to dial the police number. I struggled for a while, my brain unable to control my body. Finally, I managed to call the police, but I wasn't calm enough and accidentally turned on the speaker. 911, what's your emergency? I immediately hung up, standing rooted to the ground, squeezing the phone tightly as if trying to break it. It felt like I hadn't breathed for 3 minutes. After seeing no reaction from the man, I immediately texted my best friend to call the police for me. Suddenly, I heard a metallic clash, like a knife scraping under the floor. I sent the message and quickly turned off the phone. I mentally prepared for what would happen next. When I turned back, I panicked to see Milo playing with a small knife under the bed. In an instant, I rushed to pick up Milo and grabbed the knife, then ran out and slammed the door shut. I stood staring at the door, breathing heavily. It felt like leaving the bedroom gave me enough oxygen to breathe. I hugged Milo tightly, my hands trembling, pointing the knife straight towards the door. I was sure the next thing would be banging on the door, cursing, and a madman rushing out. I was ready to resist at any cost. But I didn't hear any noise. Everything was eerily silent. I couldn't know what the man really wanted. How he managed to break into my house and hide under my bed for how long. Whether he would suddenly appear here and end my life. Suddenly, the sound of police sirens rang out, and I hugged Milo tightly, running out quickly. When I met the police and told them everything that had just happened, I felt relieved. After the police searched my bedroom and all the other nooks and crannies in the house, the truly horrifying thing appeared. They found the body of a dead man under my bed. I was stunned to realize it was Robert, the creepy neighbor. Robert lived alone opposite my house, a man over 50 years old. Robert had repeatedly accosted me to spend the night with him. I overlooked it, thinking he had mental issues, until I lost patience and threatened to call the police. Robert stopped his creepy antics. After the investigation, the police said Robert died of a sudden stroke. He had been dead for about 12 hours, which was the time I was away on a business trip and hadn't returned home. It was horrifying to imagine how he would have acted if I had been home at that time. I redesigned my house with the bedroom in a different location and started using a mattress directly on the floor instead of a bed. Until now, the image of Robert with his glaring, wild white eyes still deeply haunts me.
The evil behind beauty. Adela is a girl with an open-minded lifestyle who loves hanging out with friends at bars. Even though she's just 25, she's got a comfy place right in the middle of the city and drives a fancy car. Adela's not planning to get married, and she isn't in any serious relationships either. Everything's kinda up in the air. One night, Adela was driving home solo after staying out at a bar until 3 a.m. Here, she meets this totally awesome guy named Marcus. They drank, talked, and danced together. Adela felt Marcus really liked her. She jokingly thought that she was about to add another guy to her collection of unclear relationships. Adela was still feeling buzzed from the drinks and music, happily humming as she drove. Suddenly, a red car started tailing Adela's car. At first, she didn't think much of it until the car kept flashing its lights and honking. Adela felt really uneasy, thinking it was some drunk or creep following her. She stepped on it, but the red car kept right on her tail. The guy behind the wheel got bolder, speeding up and rear-ending Adela's car over and over. Realizing it wasn't a joke anymore, Adela swerved right onto a shortcut and managed to lose the red car. At home, Adela was still freaking out, thanking God she made it out safe. Adela went to bed but woke up soon after because she heard noises in the house. Adela looked around and found out the basement window was open. She shut it fast and went back to her room. Once she was sure everything was okay, Adela went back to sleep. The next morning, Adela went back down to the basement. After checking things out, she looked really mad and freaked out. When she returned to the living room and sat down to eat breakfast, Adela tuned into the news. Police have located one of the citizens reported missing in recent days. The victim was a 31-year-old man with multiple incisions and cuts near sensitive areas. Although his physical condition remains stable, the man is exhibiting signs of severe psychological trauma. In the early afternoon, Adela grabbed coffee with her bestie Erica. Adela told Erica about running into a weird car last night. Erica told Adela to watch out because there have been a bunch of people disappearing lately. The victims were young folks who got into accidents while walking alone at night. Adela brushed off Erica's warning and switched gears, asking about her best friend's love life instead. Erica was all hyped talking about this guy she's been seeing lately. That night, Adela still went out late despite Erica's warnings. She learned from what had happened and got home a bit earlier than the night before. Around midnight, Adela was driving home and spotted that red car again. This time, the red car went ahead, so Adela snapped a photo of the license plate with her phone. When she got home, the first thing she did was check the security around the house and down in the basement. After making sure everything was safe, Adela went back to her room and started digging up info on the owner of that red car using the license plate number she got. Buff, 29 years old, runs his own car garage. This guy is even cooler than Marcus, the dude Adela met last night. Adela noticed something familiar about Buff that piqued her interest even more. The next day, Adela found Buff's garage, but instead of going in, she just hung outside and watched for a while before taking off. That night, When Buff left the garage, Adela followed him all the way home in her car. When Buff saw the strange girl, he looked surprised and asked. Adela boldly walked up and accused Buff of being a creep who had been following her. Adela even asserted that Buff was behind the recent disappearances and warned him she'd call the cops on him. Buff quickly explained himself. "I saw some dude chilling behind your car. I followed and kept flashing my lights just to give you a heads up, 'cause I've been hearing about those disappearances lately too. But you've got some serious driving skills. I lost sight of you and had to just head home." Buff asked about the man in the back of Adela's car, but she said there wasn't anybody there. After sorting things out, Adela asked if she could come over to Buff's place to have tea. Buff was taken aback by Adela's boldness, but didn't hesitate to turn down a pretty girl. Buff went inside, and Adela came up and dropped some flirting lines. Buff quickly backed off from Adela, kept his distance, and said he already had a girlfriend. Seeing Adela look disappointed, Buff quickly diffused the situation by offering her a glass of orange juice before taking off. Right as Buff turned around to hand Adela the glass of water, she reached out and jabbed a small needle into Buff's neck. He freaked out and pushed Adela away, but the drug had already kicked in, and Buff passed out a few minutes later. When Buff woke up later, he found himself in a dark room that reeked of fish and bleach. Buff's legs and arms were all tied up tight. Right next to Buff is this dude with a skinny body, all beat up on his face with infections. It's Marcus. Buff freaked out, screamed loud, and started flailing around, accidentally elbowing someone hard. Buff glanced back and saw it was a girl. Even more surprising was that the girl was Erica, who had just agreed to be his girlfriend yesterday. Buff freaked out and yelled Erica's name, but she wasn't moving at all. It's unclear if Erica's still alive or not. There were a few more folks in the room moaning and barely hanging on. Footsteps got louder, and in walked Adela with a stun gun. Turns out, she was the one behind everything. She hits up bars to find people, brings them back to the basement, and messes them up just for her own kicks. Behind that pretty and delicate appearance lurks a messed up and creepy soul. Buff screamed his lungs out into the night, but nobody around knows the messed up stuff going on inside that fancy, decked out house.
I'm Carrie, the third child in a large family in California. In total, there were 10 of us siblings, but there used to be 11. Our oldest brother unfortunately left us when he was very young, a loss that my mother always held in her heart. I grew up in a family where every relationship was complicated and hard to understand. My mother gave birth to her first son when she was only 14 years old, and the man who became her husband was someone who had a close familial relationship with my mother's family. The entanglement wasn't just in bloodlines, but also in how the head of the family ran everything. From a young age, my siblings and I lived in an extremely closed-off environment. When I turned 12, the whole family moved to a bigger house. Everyone hoped it would be a new beginning, but then we realized it was just a place for him to control everyone even more tightly. The house was like its own world, where every action had to follow unusual rules. We weren't free to communicate, weren't allowed to share feelings, and were separated into different living areas. The brothers lived in the west area, while my mother and the daughters lived in the east. Talking, playing, or even seeing each other was limited. I tried many times to speak up, to show my disagreement with those imposed rules, but that only got me into more trouble. His reactions were always very strict and unpredictable. During those times, I felt extremely alone, because no one in the house was brave enough to speak the truth. It seemed like they were caught in a cycle of fear and resignation. When I turned 15, the strange behaviors from the head of the family started to become clearer. He spent more time around the area where my mother and sisters lived than what was normal. Even what clothes I wore wasn't my own decision. I once heard my mother quietly begging him to keep his distance from the children. But that plea didn't seem to be heard. I understood that I needed to be stronger than ever. Over the next 3 years, I did everything I could to keep myself safe and protect my younger sisters. It wasn't an easy time, both physically and mentally, but I was determined not to let those boundaries be crossed again. When I turned 18, I decided to leave that place. In the darkness of the night, I ran away and reported everything I had witnessed and experienced to the police. I knew that, as an adult, my words might be trusted more. But what broke my heart was that all my siblings denied it. They praised him as an ideal father. I understood that they had been deeply psychologically affected, like being imprisoned not just by doors, but also by their own minds. I moved to another town, working at a McDonald's, almost a 2-hour drive from home. Even though I lived in a cramped and humble room, it was the first time I felt true freedom to live authentically, to decide my own life. I still kept in secret contact with one younger sister, the one I always worried about the most. Every message from her was a small ray of light in the darkness of my past life. And then, one day, she texted me, "Sister, I'm so scared. He's completely lost control." At that moment, I knew it was time to go back. I immediately reported to the police and returned home. When I arrived, I saw a large number of law enforcement officers already present at the old house. Inside, there was shouting, chaotic sounds, and extreme tension. I screamed out the names of my siblings, my heart feeling like it was breaking. A moment later, the space fell silent. The door burst open, and he stepped out, quietly, with an appearance that astonished everyone. That calmness was in complete contrast to what had just happened inside. After the incident, the police conducted a thorough investigation. What they discovered went far beyond any initial assumptions. In that house, there were many signs of extreme control that had lasted for decades. Many of my family members had lived in a deep cycle of trauma, which even now is difficult to put into words. Marcus Wesson, that man, was once known as a father, a normal citizen. But in reality, behind those doors was a perverted world, hidden by a calm exterior. Even now, I still wake up in the middle of the night and feel like I'm still living in that house. But then I realize I got out, and I will find every way to help my siblings find their own paths, even if it's late. The story above is based on a true crime that occurred in California. Marcus Wesson, a man with the appearance of a normal person, concealed a life full of perversion and extreme control. When the truth about the life behind the curtain was revealed, he was not only a cunning individual, but also the leader of a group with signs of a perverted cult. The city's police chief called it the most painful and shocking case they had ever witnessed. The dream of a loving father is normal for children, but for the Wesson family, the father became the biggest ghost in their memories, robbing them of their freedom, happiness, and even the lives of innocent children.
My name's Fiona. I am 32 years old. I had just ended a 10-year relationship, so now I'm residing alone in a Park Vista apartment in Chicago, Illinois. I'll be honest, it's kinda tough trying to balance things after the nasty breakup. But I'm fine, I thought to myself. I'm strong, I'm tough, and things gonna be alright. I'm finally away from such selfish, control freak bastard. It's about damn time I set myself free. And so last Sunday, I spent my entire day finally free to do whatever I like. About midday, 12 o'clock, I had brunch while joyfully browsing the internet. I came across an advertisement about a surveillance closed-circuit camera, CCTV, that, as the developer said it, totally suited with families wanting to keep themselves safe. According to them, this product deemed to be the flagship model of the next generation, sparkling smart. It could capture both video and sound in crystal clear quality. Come to think of it, they said, it's a must-have for families with children or elderly living all alone by themselves, so the rest of the family would be able to keep an eye on them. I am convinced with that conclusion. They were damn right, I thought to myself. I'm living all by myself in this city. No friends, no family. Not even a single acquaintance was living here. A surveillance camera at the porch maybe wasn't a bad idea. Now, with the discount program was still in effect, I didn't hesitate in purchasing the item right away. It arrived at my doorstep a few days later. My excitement was well-founded. The instructions were clear enough that I am able to get it set up with just a few steps. Mobile connection felt pretty solid. Everything fit like a perfect jigsaw puzzle, and I had set it up over the front door. I was pretty sure that I wouldn't need any men at all in my life. I was the empress of my own life, with full helm at the palm of my hands. Imaging and audio was as advertised, good and solid. I am very impressed with the 360 view of this camera. Also came with a unique function, intruder alert. To test the function, I ran out and back in. Didn't take very long for the phone to register the alert. This function must be pretty universal. It's just me living under a cave, I thought to myself. I'm contented with being in the good deal. That night, the alert notification jolted me up from my sleep. That turned out to be the intruder alert, sent via the camera. Groggily, I checked on the camera. I noticed that all around me being very quiet. It was 3:13 in the morning. There wasn't much convincing for me to just turn the phone off and go back to sleep. However, for many days afterward, the camera kept sending me the notifications at exactly around 3:13 in the morning, despite the fact that there wasn't any sign of intrusion at all. After a while, I decided to contact the supplier about the issue. They told me to restart the device and reset the connection. Pretty sure it's just a simple software bug, they guaranteed. I told them sternly that if things kept going this way, I'd return the product and ask for a full refund. That night, I went to bed, pretty worriedly. And then, just as clockwork, at 3:13, the notifications came. Same issue with the intruder alert function. The same issue that kept me awake for the last couple of days. This shit had me awake for days now, so I'm kind of pissed off with that. So I decided to forego checking on my phone, but instead charged straight out of my bedroom. After I opened up my door, the frustration was still there. Nobody's outdoors, so the problem here is the goddamn camera. So I got to the chair, climbed up to take that camera down with all the haste. However, it's not as easy as I installed it. The removal process is kind of messy, and it made me very frustrated. I just wish I could scream my guts out. At least it would calm me down. Yet, I couldn't. There are other apartments. So all I could do was swallow it down, get back to bed, and try to get some sleep. I returned to my bedroom, picked up my phone, and planned to disconnect this goddamn camera from my phone. I will return it tomorrow, I thought, opening up the apps. In order to turn it off, I must go through the main page with the footage of myself lying on the bed. However, in the corner of the screen, there's something really scary happening. A large figure. The figure, though I couldn't make out the shape, seemed to be smiling at me. The hair on the back of my neck stood straight up as the figure came forwards and put a hand over my shoulder. I couldn't sense its touch. Is that a person? Is that a supernatural being? I pulled the sheet over my face, shivering at the crazy thing I had just witnessed. It was only when the morning alarm went off that I was jolted awake, my mind stretched by all the half-awake and surreal experiences. Everywhere around me was a blur between reality and nightmare. Though I temporarily left it aside, I still had work to do. And so I went to work that day, paid little attention to what I had seen last night. After a long day at work, I went home and headed straight to my bed. I literally collapsed the moment I hit the mellowing pillow, though I was once again jolted awake by the phone's notification. It was the intruder alert once again from the camera, though at this time around, it was indeed an intruder. I was startled at the sight of someone's head. It appeared to be a very tall, statured man. I carefully adjusted the camera angle to see better. However, the man had been maneuvering very close, so I couldn't make out his face. There's the sound like lock-picking over my doorknob. It made me shudder. Someone over there was trying to break in. Before I was able to do anything, the tall man lifted his face up directly at the camera lens. It was Joyce, my obsessive ex-boyfriend. But it was really strange. Wasn't he in Traverse right now? Joyce seemed to acknowledge the fact that he's being watched, and he said,
"Do you remember? I will always find you, alive or dead."
Joyce smiled his creepy smile, with blood flowing out from his mouth, nostrils and eyelids. It was haunting to even look at. I was panicked at the sight of it, my body froze in fear, unable to make any moves. The phone screen flashed continuously as the footage became more and more grainy. After a few seconds that seemed to last a lifetime, the footage cleared out again. Joyce's face reappeared, this time even more haunting than ever. His face was distorted all over the screen, twisted bizarrely as if impacted heavily by an unseen force. I screamed aloud. My chest burned with terror. All I can do was to call the police and my parents, sobbing the entire time. The police did not find any forced entry attempts at my apartment doorway, like at all. The apartment complex and the surrounding public security cameras also couldn't provide any solid appearance of Joyce. The only footage available was the ones I provided on my phone. My mom and dad took the first flight to come to my aid late this afternoon. I burst into tears as they arrived. After the situation had calmed down, they bombarded me with questions full of suspicion. "Fiona, my dear, are you certain that it was Joyce? Don't you know what happened?" I did not know of anything, and threw them a bewildered look back at them. Joyce is dead in a serious traffic collision 3 days ago. His body was found wedged between the car and the freighter, so... I was perplexed at the information. 3 days ago was March 13th. 0313. His word rung aloud.
"I will always find you, alive or dead."